Amazing, amazing. Cool. So we are going to go ahead and get started here. I'm Taylor Harrington. If we haven't met before, that would be a shame because I love hanging out with members. But I am your head of community, and I am so excited that you're here with us today. This is definitely going to be a session that is both inspiring and incredibly practical. So if you've ever thought about starting a podcast or are taking your existing podcast to the next level, you are in the right place. We are joined by the amazing Jennifer Griffith, who is the host of About Your Mother, which ranks in the top 10% podcast globally. Jennifer has built her show into a powerful platform for storytelling and connection. And now she is here to share the strategies and the lessons that can help you do the same. So, with her expertise, Jennifer will walk us through how to define your podcast vision, connect with your ideal audience, choose the right tools, and measure what really matters. She definitely brings a unique blend of creativity and strategy that will leave you all feeling confident and equipped to launch or elevate your podcast in a way that fuels your business and also amplifies your voice. So, Jennifer, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic on over to you. We are so thrilled to have you here. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with the community.
Well, thank you for being here. And Taylor, can I have you on every call? I mean,
Sure.
goodness, I got goosebumps and the enthusiasm overload is
Hell yeah,
is
I am here for
great.
it. I am a
Awesome.
professional. It's funny. I sometimes will say I'm like a professional cheerleader, but I'm like actually I'm not a real cheerleader. Like a professional cheerleader is a job that is so not mine. I am like a professional hype woman. So hopefully, yeah, hyping you up
Professional
anytime I
hype
can.
woman.
Yeah.
Okay, that is new. Amazing. Well, before I share my screen, hi everybody. Thank you for being here. This is interactive. I will be asking you questions throughout. I want to hear from you. If you hear something from me and you want to stop me, I don't care, right? I'm a podcast host, and so that is when you're functioning at a high levels, when there's communication going back and forth, right? So one quick question. Okay, who wants to have a podcast and who has a podcast? And so I have one, I want one. And then if you want to put very quickly like a category, exercise, health, relationships, you can do that. But I just want to know really quickly when I'm seeing the chat, um, too scared to market. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, I'm writing this down. My eyes are going to dash around because I've got notes and things. Post brand, right brand, amazing. Okay. Chief of staff role, that's great. Oh, that could be fun. I have one looking to evolve, want one. Okay, great. And then for the ones that have one, maybe just really quickly put in the number of episodes you have. Just really quickly, just so I can get a meter. Great. Cool. Wonderful. Okay. Here, I'm going to share my screen here in a second. And if I did my first I was telling Taylor before you guys joined, I finished my media tour for my book in June, and then I hadn't done, excuse me, a podcast until yesterday, and I wore the wrong shirt. This is important. And I'm usually really good about my attire. So now I'm afraid I might have worn the wrong shirt today because my microphone was banging against my shirt when I was talking to him yesterday. So you just let me know. Start sharing your screen. Here we go. All right. And then I just need to get this bigger. I
While
think
you
it's
do
because
that,
of where.
I will just drop in the chat. I was just thinking I did put together a Spotify playlist for anyone that is
Uh,
a Dreamers and Doers member and a podcast host, to have
bear
one
with me.
episode featured on the playlist so that if
There
you
you are.
there we go.
Go ahead.
So if anyone here has a podcast and is not seeing their name on this playlist, definitely flag it to me in the chat. I will go ahead and add you to this. But if you are one of those soon to be podcast hosts and you're looking for some inspiration, you'll see Jennifer's playlist is on here, Jennifer's podcast is on here as well as some others. So it's a good way to just kind of get an idea of who else is already producing a podcast inside the community.
Yes.
Back
And
to you.
good for you for doing it. Amazing. All right. So I'm Jennifer. Just so you know briefly, because there will be some of this content in the call, I spent almost 20 years as a technology sales leader, and I left 9 years ago to write a book, which came out about 9 months ago. And I'll walk you through this, but the podcast actually came after my dream of writing a book because I had written a book and then the pandemic happened. And so I have part of what's interesting about my career is that I have a technology background and a business background, and now I have a creative background because it took me 9 years to build these two things that you see on the right, my podcast and my book, which just came out. And I've had a lot of fun promoting both. But the podcast was essential for selling the book. And so that is, having put that together, one of the things I truly believe is that you're not only do you need to be connected to why you're doing a podcast, it needs to fuel your business. To be able to monetize a podcast is very difficult. If you want to make money, let's say on ads or things, you have to have a minimum of 3,000 or 5,000 downloads per episode. But if you're trying to sell a service or a book or build a platform or validate your voice or appear higher in SEO, a podcast is very helpful. So I think sometimes people look at them as, I need to have so many downloads, I need to do this. What is most important is what we'll go through today is why you're doing it and what it fuels. And so that's why I put these two things on the right or left or whatever it appears on your screen. But my podcast and my book are deeply intertwined and they feed each other. So I'll walk through that with you in a minute. So Seth Godin, here's someone who's, podcasting is not going away. It can feel daunting because there's so many out there that do so well. You listen to Mel Robbins or Rich Roll or somebody like this, and you feel like that's not my space. That is not true. This is your space, and you don't need to have millions of downloads or listeners to do well. Let me just tell you that. You can have tens of thousands and still do really, really well. And I think one of the most important things about podcasting is that it so quickly connects you to communities that you would not normally attract. And so for some of you who are doing it already or who want to do it, there's a certain audience that you're going after. And that's what we'll talk about, one of the things we'll talk about is how to identify those so it supports your overall business. Okay, so when did I start my podcast and why am I showing you this picture? Because when I launched my podcast, I was in hell. It was 2020. I had just finished my book and the pandemic happened. And I was sitting next to my son for 8 hours a day doing homeschooling because he went to a really academic school and he was on Zoom all day. And we were actually not living in our home. And that is truly his bed at the end of my bed. And I was trying to work and I was trying to sell a book. And I wrote a memoir, which is based on the story of my mom's life intertwined with my own. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? I can't go anywhere. I can't, what am I going to do that's going to allow me to reach people and build a community really quickly without writing more? Because as you could tell, here we were in this room together for months on end, next to each other. And I said, well, you know what? I want to talk to people about the things that I learned writing my book. And that's how the podcast was born. So I was desperate for connection and I was in this little bit of now what, how do I validate me as an author and then find readers and build a community around this whole new thing that I'm doing while I have my cute little son sitting next to me. So you can do it under any circumstances, you all. You can do it with limited time and intrusion into your own life. Podcasts can happen. So am I too late? Some of you have started already. Some of you are already in there thinking, do I really own a space here? So this is a really scary number. There's 4.5 million podcasts out in the world. However, the real number is actually there's only 500,000 that are truly active. So you hear that there's millions and millions of them, but there's only 500,000 that are active. There's 487,000 podcasts that are launched in the last 6 months. 90% of them fail. And some of those reasons for failure is that because people get overwhelmed, they don't get the numbers that they think they're going to get, and it just takes a long time, and they get intimidated by it. I'm telling you, don't be intimidated. The biggest indicator of success is not stopping. Okay, write that down. The biggest indicator of success is not stopping. It's adapting. It's investing in this. And mind you, I am not a poster child for, let's say, how successful my podcast could be because I do it once a month. I don't do it every week. I had someone just recently actually ask me to take it over and to put it on his network. And I said, I can't do it because I cannot find the time to do it weekly, which is the demands of the contract. However, even though I can't meet that demand in the moment, it is still serving me incredibly well from other perspectives that mean a lot for me. So, for instance, because I do a monthly podcast, my SEO is more frequent. And so I appear at the top, and I'm competing with another Jennifer Griffith author who's written like 12 books. I've written one. And one of the most important things is that because I'm dropping a podcast every month, I'm beating her in SEO, and now I have the knowledge panel. So just remember, your indicators of success in podcast have to be very unique to what you're doing at the time. Good? Thumbs up? Because I can just see, okay. So here's the real numbers. If you get this many downloads in the first 7 days, this is where you sit. So now you're seeing what my math is. I get a couple hundred downloads in the first several days of 7 days of my podcast, and that puts me in the top 10%. The difference between 5 and 1% and the 0.001%, the Joe Rogans of the world, is so massive. Don't measure yourself against that, right? I'm sure you're not, but that's something that I don't want you to get intimidated by it. I want you to see how much you win by getting to 100 downloads in the first 7 days, right? And that's an important thing, is kind of reset your mindset on podcasting, the actual numbers, the millions that are out there versus the people who are just not giving up and they're consistently doing it. That's a big differentiator. Okay. I'm going to say this to you from a business perspective. You have to have your why on why you're doing your podcast. So this is a part where I'm going to ask you to do some work. Clarify your purpose for starting or elevating your own show. How does it support your brand authority, your thought leadership, and your trust building? Part of why I share my story with you is to tell you, well, when I was initially starting the podcast 3 years ago, it was to sell a book. Now, my podcast is to build community, connect with people who will buy my book, promote my book, and to win an SEO. So take just a minute or so, and I want you to write that down on why you are doing this. Okay, so everybody wrote down a why? Good. Okay, amazing. So then I want to give, when I mentioned my tech background, one of the things that I did is I married my tech experience with my creative experience. So when you're building anything, there are a few things that you need to do. And so when I worked at Salesforce for 10 years, nearly 10 years, one of the things that we did, I don't know if all of you know Salesforce, but it's an incredibly innovative company. And we were constantly innovating and growing. And one of the things that we did every year is that we had to define our goals for our team or our organization, and each individual in the company did it. And I teach this a lot to writers, and it's about writing a business plan for your creative work. And a lot of times we don't think those two things go together, but they do. Creativity requires a plan, and a podcast requires a plan. So one of the things that you want to do, even if you started one and you have 6 episodes or 11 episodes or whatever it might be, you want to define the theme and the format and the voice, but you also want to define your vision, your values, your methods, your obstacles, and your measures. And that's why I was honing the previous slide, that we get inundated by the ones that do really, really well, Mel Robbins and that type of thing, where they're in the millions. But as you can see, if you reset your expectations and your goals, getting a couple hundred downloads is great too. 50 is good. And so one of the things, write down this framework, but this is how you align your why to your overall mission and how you're crafting it. And so the V2 Mom, write down those 5 categories. I can do math too, I promise. And I want you to write those down, and we will go through them. The vision is, what do I want to do with this? Why am I having these conversations with people? Why am I having case studies? Why am I having guests? Why am I talking just by a soliloquy every week or month? But define what that vision is for your podcast. And then you want to get very specific about the values of it. So for instance, I'm of course going to reference my own. But my value was I wanted to have meaningful conversations about people and the influence that their mother had on their life. I wanted to get people to start from the beginning, knowing that every single conversation was going to be different. And I also wanted to expand. I had this huge technology network that wasn't really going to help me with my creative work. but they were going to buy my books later on, which they did. So one of my other values was I wanted to build a community around this conversation, around the themes of my book. Method. So what was the method in which I was going to do it? At first, and I'll get to the obstacles in a second, but the method was I was going to reach out to people, invite them to interview. I started with friends, and I do say start with friendly fire if you haven't done it already. You can record people. You do not need to publish it. I recorded friends. I got, tested equipment and things like that. But, what are the ways that you are going to start doing this? Because it is very easy to put it to the side. But a podcast, if you do it and you do it well and you do it consistently, can really transform your business, whatever that business is. So one of the methods I had was I was going to start with friends, and then I was going to get more confident, have some up there, and then start reaching out to people I had never met. And I don't know if you've looked at my page. It doesn't matter if you did or not, but I have interviewed people that I never thought I would meet. And so, for instance, Jane Green is a very successful novelist. She sold 10 million books. She has a column on the Daily Mail. I emailed her and said, I want you to be on my show. And she said, yes. So when the method to building your confidence is practice. It's knowing that sometimes you're going to record and you're not going to publish it. And if, of course, if you're doing friends, say, I might not publish this, that type of thing. Don't promise you're going to put them on a show that you don't put them on, but get comfortable with those types of things, and then grow into a confident place. I do want to say another method, it is super important. You have to have pretty graphics. I did hire somebody. I spent the money on I think they could use updating now, but I spent the money on these graphics, and people immediately responded to it. And so it is really important. And as we know, there's a lot of really talented help in Dreamers and Doers and out there in the atmosphere who are not that expensive, but it is worth it. And I'll show you why in a second. And then the obstacles. What are the obstacles? Mine has always been time. The reason I showed you the picture of my son next to me was that was my life for 3 years. I've been doing this in, very limited space, but it's also become very successful because, again, like I said, you don't give up. You just keep going. And then how are you going to measure your success? This gets back to what are you really trying to do? Are you trying to sell books? Are you trying to sell a professional service? Get very specific about that, and make sure that you do this before you start or before you keep on going. Make sure you have this framework, because it's a really good validation point as you do this kind of in isolation, right? So let me stop there. I want to see, Taylor, do we have any questions or things that people want to ask right now?
Yeah, so we do have one question from Seta, which
Yes.
is, where do you use the graphics for advertising?
I use it for, great question. I use it for social media, of course, on the pages, the Spotify and Apple pages that it is, and for my website. And of course, one of the things, like I remember asking Ann Fessler, who wrote The Girls Who Went Away, which is my by far most downloaded episode of all time, very specific, very deeply connected to my book, that conversation was. And I remember she said, oh, your website's beautiful. So many people say, oh, your website or your graphics are beautiful. Don't underestimate that. I mean, I think some people go and put up really trashy things that are just like lifeless. Make sure that you spend that time on what your brand is, and know that there's tons of resources in Dreamers and Doers, right, Taylor? And I'm sorry, you guys, I've got like
100%.
three screens going here, so bear with me,
100%. And then
bear with me on my eyeballs. Huh?
A good place to find those types of resources is inside of the Evergreen Offers section of the community. So if anyone's looking like,
Yeah.
where could I find that? You can search keywords like website, graphics, etc., and you might see some support there.
Yes. Okay. So case studies here. These are a few people that I know personally, and we all have different stories. And so me in the middle, for me, it was just, in order to find and build relationships with other people, this is my business card. This was my business card for a long time, and before I had a book. And so originally I met with Christopher Lochhead, Follow Your Different. He's a really great podcaster. I would follow him. His brand is very, very specific. And this is the advice he gave me when I said, hey, I'm thinking about launching a podcast. He said, record 3 and just stop overthinking it. Just start being someone who asks people's questions and who has a format. And what I think you'll find here, well, maybe Taylor, actually, I want to ask people if they see
Mhm.
what's consistent in all of these graphics.
Mm.
And if you can, my chat, I'm not seeing the chat, so do you mind just like telling me
Oh,
what
I
they
got
say?
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Taylor.
Sandra says professional. Jessica said easy to read. Claire said the podcast title is very clear. I'll add that I notice all of their names are included in the graphics as well.
Yep, yep, absolutely. And so for me, for instance, their names are in it. It's something that I think I could add to mine. So
Oh,
mine's
interesting. Yeah, here I'm like skipping over yours.
no, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that because when I look at these, I'm like, oh, I probably could get to the place where I'm now adding my photo and my name
Mm.
because, and some of my graphics, by the way, have by Jennifer Griffith at the bottom. But when you look at these, you know what this podcast is about. You absolutely know what it's about, but it's also something else. They're all very generic in a way. These are big words. Follow your different. Love, loss, and hallucinations. Hallucinations being a little specific, but love and loss being a really broad topic. Kelly Corrigan wonders. Obviously, she's a star now, so she's a little bit of a celebrity. But it's just a wonder. I mean, how much can you throw in that bucket? A lot. Family secrets. We all have them, right? And so I want you to look at these and just see that something like this is going to hit home because it's going to say what you're doing without tying your hands. And I do find that some people, if you don't have the Joe Rogan or the Mel Robbins name, sometimes their podcast it limits them. One of the reasons I use mother and I highlighted mother is because I also do interviews about Mother Nature. I do how do we mother ourselves? It's a ubiquitous term that you can use in lots of different ways. So anyway, so taking that in. Any other comments or things that people want to say on that?
Nothing else in the chat so far.
Okay, amazing. I have some news for you on tools and tech. I'm a dinosaur. I use Zoom and these because they sound great. People get really caught up on the tools that they're using. When I first started, I consulted a friend who does audio. She does audio recording in LA. And I said, "What's the best place to record?" She said, "Your closet." And she gave me and recommended a device. Don't get hooked up on the tools. It's so brilliant. I think one of the things, the timing for starting a podcast for me was that everybody was on Zoom. So then, you can just interview people all around the world. Think how lucky we are in the last 5 years, how adopted Zoom has been. Riverside is what I'm moving to. I find that to be the best. It was the best tool that I was interviewed on, and I'm moving to that. The other thing I'm going to say to you, and write this down, do not edit your podcast. I did for a long time and I wasted so much time. Let me tell you what happens when you listen to yourself. Everything. You criticize yourself. You're just like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do this. That sounds terrible." And I did that. I did it for a long, long time. Don't do that. Now, you can do it in Adobe Audition. You can do it in Vimeo. You can do it in Descript. But I highly encourage you, if you can, to hire a producer. That is when you start getting more efficient. Now, can you listen to their edit of you? Absolutely. So I have a second layer edit that I do. So I deliver it to Haley at Gaffin Creative. She's fabulous if you want an intro. And what I do is I just do an editorial check. She sends me the notes, she sends me the audio, and I throw it into script and I literally just scan it and make sure it doesn't have anything in there that I don't want and let it go. You are making a huge mistake if you're editing it yourself. So quick question, Taylor, to the group. Anybody who has episodes, did you edit yourself?
Mm. Also, I'm laughing that you know Haley because she was in the last community I ran. She's absolutely amazing. I don't think
Oh
we've
yeah, she's
met before.
incredible. She's
Yeah.
the best producer I've ever worked with, and I've worked with three, just so you guys know.
Well, I'll drop her info in the chat. Okay, Emily said yes. Linda said no. TNT
Okay,
said no way. Hired a professional. Ellen said yes.
amazing.
I have a co-host and we edit them, but we are light editors. And
Good.
Tiana said, I tried editing 10 episodes on my own a few years back and it took a long time, so long. So I released the podcast and trying to restart this year, but
Yeah.
much respect to podcast editors.
Yes, absolutely. And so podcast editors are incredible. There's all different ranges. I think the most important thing is the deliverables that you have after it. It's the show notes with the SEO layer to it. It's the video and audio recordings that you have for social media. And, and like I said before, and how it ties to your brand, how it ties to your website page and whatever else, wherever else you're sharing yourself. Video, I didn't start with it. I would start with it out of the gate. If you haven't started already, just do it. Riverside is a great tool for that. It does great kind of measuring in on the video versus Zoom, where it's just kind of flat, like you're seeing me now, and it doesn't like zoom in on different areas. So anyways, but start with video. I don't know if you've ever done this, but there's great video editing tools now where you can actually just edit off the content and then it clips the video really easy. So, but again, as much as you can, hire it out so that you're more efficient and then you're just interviewing more because that's your most important thing. Afterwards, and I am happy to send you a list of all of these things, all the tools that you can use. Speakers, lights, all those types of things. And they're just know that you evolve over time on how you're doing it. And but I don't think that's the thing that we need to most focus on. It's getting more to your purpose and your methodology around delivering a podcast that is most important. And hopefully that's coming through. And for consistency and workflow, it is again hiring it out as much as you can. And as you know, there's just so many different layers of ways that people can help you. Lighting and camera, that becomes important. That can get expensive. So there's a couple of options that I'll give you. Again, this can be enough. The most important thing on Zoom is that you're double recording, that you're recording the guest as well as yourself. And then as you grow, the collaboration on social media and who you interview becomes most important because of their followers. And that's if you're trying to get your word out there more. Now, maybe you're trying to do a podcast where you're just sharing your thought leadership and it's something that you want to package and send with potential clients. That's great too. You just have to determine in that V2 mom that I was saying, what are the things that you're really trying to accomplish in the year, knowing that a podcast evolves year over year. And I'll stop for questions right there.
So as far as getting Rex for that support for video editing, it looks like, it seems like maybe Haley does the video editing as well. Are there any other ways, like I know Clara mentioned Upwork, are there any other tips you have for where to source those folks? That was a
Yes.
question from Jessica in the chat.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, Dreamers and Doers is a great one now, but Upwork is where I started. And then as I had more validation, then I moved over to a professional producer who cost me a couple hundred. If you're looking at the ROI there, for me, what is one of the most important tenets or measures of my success is my SEO, because then that means my name is out there and that I can, when people are looking me up or I'm trying to get booked at an author event or on a podcast or things, that they can find me really easily. So that's a big value to me. So that's worth a couple $100. So then you have to mark your ROI. Do I sell books through podcasts? Yeah, for sure. I do. And the other thing is I now have this amazing community of guests on my show who are New York Times bestsellers who introduce me to other people. So again, making sure you've got those measures of success on what you're hoping to do and accomplish. Okay, any questions before I flip slides? Okay. So pitfalls is overthinking numbers, right? If you have 200, this is what a producer told me early on, if you have 200 engaged listeners, that is oftentimes the most valuable thing, because they're coming back and they're hitting you over and over again, and then they're sharing your podcast with others. And so why I have a couple hundred downloads when I drop is because I've got those people that follow me who download my episode right away. They became the people who bought my book right away, and that sort of thing. So you kind of get the long tail of that. The mistakes that drain your energy, editing yourself, as some of you know from editing yourself before, being a perfectionist is a big thing. And then what I tell people to do is, as you develop these things, think of the partnerships or the cross promotion that you can get with other people, whether they are your guests or someone that you invite on your show. That becomes really important. My friend Scott, who just launched Love, Lost, and Hallucinations, has a really incredible network. He has a book he's trying to sell. I sent his manuscript, which is really good, but he's been trying to sell it for 2 years. I sent it to my editor, and this is literally what she said. She said, the podcast is helping. We're watching, right? And so just know that people start watching you, whoever you're selling to, as you're developing this thing. And so that's why the 90% fail, because people give up. And that's why that's your space. You like that people give up, right? We like that people have all these good ideas and then they don't execute against them continuously. And that personally is how I grew into the top 10% for sure. Because I didn't give up in the beginning when I was looking at, I had Blueberry first, and now I use Buzzsprout, which I absolutely love. I would look at my numbers. I'd just be like, why am I doing this? This stinks. And then I know someone said I don't want to promote it. I haven't really promoted it very much other than within my own community, LinkedIn, through my friends and family. And it's done really well. I mean, I can't imagine and social media, I can't imagine if I invested and did more. I mean, where this thing would go. And that is definitely a next stage for me. But it's given me, getting back to the V2 mom, everything that I needed it to do. It is deeply connected to my why, and it gives me all of the things that I need to do or accomplish as an emerging author. And then maybe do I get representation from an organization, as someone recently pitched me? Yeah, for sure, I will. But it's not what I need right now because I don't have the time. So knowing what your obstacles and what your metrics are essential to your success. Okay, sorry, I'm losing my voice here, you all. But that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, what is success to all of you? Let's do it. First of all, do you have questions for me? And then what is success to all of you?
Quick question here from Tiana. If someone plays your episode but doesn't necessarily hit download, so personally she listens to podcasts on Spotify but doesn't necessarily download them, is just hitting play, does that count towards the host metrics?
Yes.
Cool.
Other questions? Okay, so now a little working session. I'm gonna ask you all some questions. You have ideas for a podcast, or you started yours and you don't necessarily want to promote it, but what would be success to you with your concept or what you've launched already? And unmute yourself. Please don't be shy.
I guess I'll
I'm
say
not good.
something.
Yeah.
Well,
Hi.
hi, Jennifer. Thanks for the recommendation on Haley. I will say that that's a great recommendation, so I can attest from experience. She's really good.
She's
Um,
great.
Success for me would be even just getting to 100. Like I haven't even had 100 viewers, and so I'm thinking maybe my content's not targeted enough. So that's why I'm evolving right now. I'm trying to like maybe get a little bit more niche or focused. Like you have a very focused area, and I think it hits home with people because they can relate. Mine just has been really broad, so it's been like a learning experience the last few months. I think it's
And
just
yeah, and that's great. Like nobody takes a product to market without testing it first, right? So don't get discouraged by that. Um, I remember, oh gosh, I think when I launched a friend as my first one, and it was like 35 downloads initially for a little while. Only later, when I had gotten more followers, did they start to come in and start going back and listening to older ones. So Sandra, remind me, I know your podcast, but I'm forgetting it right now. Remind me what it is and what the first couple.
it's everyday insight. So it's basically so I came from the tech world too. So it's
Yeah.
basically accomplished professionals who have advice to give small business owners, and they can be anything from it's communications based. So it's usually talking about the value of communications and branding in X, Y, or Z topics.
That's great. And I think where you could just get reaction is maybe each episode could be a specific niche, right? That you promote, and then maybe that's where the hook comes from,
Okay.
right? You've got this broad like this broad topic, like I do, mother, but then within each of those stories is a really specific kind of emotional pull for people. You know,
Mhm.
you've got someone who had a terrible mother. You had someone who was abandoned by a mother, and then marketing it around that specific thing within that broader category.
Okay.
Yeah, that you've got ton of upside with that, hon. Just keep playing with it for sure and see what works. Because not everything's going to work. That was a great one. Okay, who else? You can ask me about interviewing someone who, is there a bad interview? No, I'm just kidding. How do
I'll
you get?
I can jump in if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I haven't launched my podcast yet. I am really hoping to, for me, success is actually reconnecting with leaders in my network who know are really brilliant, and I've built a 20-year career around these folks, but they're not necessarily hiring me yet. And so it gives me a chance to reconnect with them in a more intimate and conversational way, but also hopefully lift up their stories and give them third-party validation for their leadership work, which was something a lot of us have talked about as trailblazers and needing.
Mm-hmm.
The question I have for you is really around, well, two-part question. One is, how do you think about like the questions you get into? Because I feel like the great podcast hosts are asking such interesting questions. And often I find myself in conversations with leaders, like we get to that 45 minutes in, right? And so, what I find in a podcast is you are dropped into intimacy so quickly. And so I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that. And then also, yeah, I think the other piece just that I'm curious about is how much does it matter if do you do like 10 episodes and call it a season and then completely revamp for the next season versus really wanting, is it important to really know your themes out of the gate?
These are awesome questions. Thank you. I should have put that in the deck already. No, never underestimate people's desire to talk about themselves. This is true. And at the root of any podcast is curiosity. And this is why I think I was purpose built to do mine, because that's what in technology sales, that's what you are doing. You are just inherently curious about the people that you're selling to. So I think I had a foot up in that and how to get to the root of the cause. So the questions, I'm going to be very candid with you. I take a lot of time. I research people up and down and inside out. And I send them a note before. I say, it's organic, it's a conversation, but here are the framework questions that I have. And framework just puts like some context to it. And I talk with my hands so much. I hate it when I see myself do that. But I do framework questions and they have categories. And that is really important because it gives you somewhat of a pace, because you are losing time if you don't do that. Now, do you share them with the people before or not? It really depends. I interview some people and they say you don't need to send me questions, but I do it for myself. And that is after spending a lot of time reading their books, listening to them on podcasts, reading their LinkedIn, taking in anything you can about them to make it very personal. And then, I think in the beginning when I pitch, I'm out there now, so I can't really hide. People do know something about me. So there is a give and take. You have to give them something of you in order for them to open up quickly. And so, and then seasons and themes. In the beginning, I didn't do it. I just interviewed. Then I did a series called What Happened Then that was linked to my book. That was about the women who disappeared in the decades before Roe and relinquished their children under secrecy and shame. And I did that. And then that is really when my podcast took off, because it was very specific and it was very topical at the time, right? So Sandra, that's for you too, Sandra, sorry if I got that wrong. That is something like, play with these conversations and then find a niche and find a series. But you don't have to be like Meghan Markle season 2, she'd already recorded it. So, people call things seasons or themes, but once you get your feet wet and you get comfortable with this cadence of contacting someone, researching them, sending them framework questions, and then interviewing them, producing it. Once you get into that cadence, then you can start to see that there might be themes that you can do seasons or series on, but don't feel like you have to do it yet. But I love what you're doing because on the flip, my husband has been in technology a lot of time and he gets interviewed a lot on podcasts and he loves it. And he doesn't, he's just a CRO sales guy out there selling stuff. But they're interesting because he's like, these people know all about my career and they ask me the right questions. And by the way, he's the perfect example of someone who loves to talk about themselves. So just remember, everybody has a story to tell and everybody wants to tell it. It's just how you ask. And another thing I want to say to you is nobody ever asks me how many downloads you have. Nobody asks me where do you rank in podcasts? And I actually don't even start with it. I am most genuinely interested in the value of what a discussion with that person will give people outside of in the community. That is at the root of it. And I think I do get a lot of feedback that you're a really good interviewer. And I think that's why, because I'm into it for that reason. I'm into making sure that I know exactly what other people need to hear from someone. I'm not saying I do it well all the time, but it is something that I'm really passionate about. And that all of you are too, because you want to do this. It's in your heart already. And so if you have the ache to do it, you have what it takes. Write that down. I'm just kidding. But if you have the ache to do this, you have what it takes because you're just genuinely interested in creating stories and narratives. And that's a really important, essential thing in our world. Okay, another questions. These are great.
Okay. Jessica's wondering, would you recommend having several guests or having guests or solo or a mix? So do you do episodes that are just you? Do you bring, obviously you bring on guests?
I did one collaboration that I really enjoyed, but I never actually published it. So maybe my answer is no. I really enjoyed it, but I ended up anyways, things began to change. But I have done layered interviews where I've interviewed people in different generations, daughter, mother, grandmother, and that was really cool. And that was related to the Holocaust though. So that one went international, which was really cool. And I started hearing from people in Europe and things like that who were connected to them. And that was just a really wild, cool thing. So yes, do it. It is a little challenging. And for me, I like the intimacy of this one-on-one that I get with people.
Jennifer, do you ever do solo episodes too?
Me? Just
Yeah.
me?
Yeah,
Yes,
just you.
I
Okay.
do. I do it around Mother's Day, again, theme, right? I do it around Mother's Day where I do a compilation. And don't forget that when you're recording with people, you can do that. Once you have a bunch of episodes, you can create episodes from that, right? So, once you're sitting on content, you can do a lot of different things with it. And then I interviewed my mom. Yeah, so I entered my book and then I interviewed my mom, who the book is about. And that one does really well, obviously.
Nice. And this is a question from just me.
Yeah.
Curious how you decide on the timing per episode when you maybe are doing some of this variety and how you are formatting it. So, did the episode with the several, like a generational episode, end up being quite a bit longer? Were your solo episodes like a quick 10, 15-minute type thing, or were they the same amount of time? How do you see that variety impacting a show's,
downloadability? Yeah. That's a good question. That you follow your gut on. My idea is that you have people for about 30 to 40 minutes. You have their attention span for that long. But if you have someone who's telling a story that is really, really profound, they will stay for a long time. I don't agree with Rich Roll, who interviews people for an hour and a half or 2 hours every time. I never listen to the whole thing. I really don't. I can't, except James Fry. That was incredible. Talk about an incredible interview that was recent. But I think, for business ones, you've got 30 to 40 minutes with people before they drop off. However, if you've got a really juicy one, people will stay. And And again, someone like Haley, she's got a really good gut. And so I'll send her an hour. That's the time I allot for every recording. I have someone for an hour, and then she usually brings it down to 40.
Great. Do we have any other questions people want to put in the chat or come off mute for?
Such a good, well, hopefully this was helpful in some way. Shake your heads, thumbs up, thumbs
Yes.
down.
Is this your final slide?
Oh no, maybe I have one more. You're right. I do, don't I? Let's see. Hold on. Am I still sharing? No, yes, I am. Come on now. Sorry, technical difficulties with someone here. Resume. There we go. Yeah, I think that, oh, Q&A. Yeah, we already did that.
Love it. Amazing. Okay, well, we'll stick around for another couple minutes and see if anyone else wants to ask a question. But first, let's go ahead and just add some confetti and love into the chat for Jennifer here. That was amazing. And as I said to Jennifer before we got on this call, I have so many conversations with members like all of you at different points in the podcast hosting journey. So oh, it seems like I'm hearing an echo. Can you all hear that, or you're good? Let's see. Okay, looks like everyone's muted now. But all to say that I think that this is also a great session to return to once you maybe are in a different phase of saying, "Ooh, okay, now I'm ready to dial things up once again," or maybe you have that podcast in motion. You can go back to this and say, "Let's see what Jennifer brought as a tip for folks that are later in that journey, etc." But this was amazing, so thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to drop a couple of quick links in the chat, including how to say hi to Jennifer back on Circle inside the Dreamers and Doers community, where her Substack can be found, her email, so you can get those equipment tips and more that she mentioned, as well as just a feedback form for this session today. It is anonymous. We love being able to shower Jennifer with amazing comments afterwards. So if you have any great feedback you want to share, please go ahead and do so.
Again, invite Taylor to anything, any event. To get to feel confident. Well, and one last thing, sorry, I did fail to mention, because I'm very specific about my guests, is, of course, as you know, there are guest booking sites for you. And those are great. They are very noisy. So just know that, right? Don't be dependent. That's why I don't overshare on that, is that I don't want people to be dependent on those booking sites, because you definitely, all of you have a specific thing that you want to do, and you probably have specific people in mind. And that's what I want to encourage most of all, versus becoming dependent on this, podcasting network site, where there's thousands and thousands of people. It's just really, really noisy. And, but, if you're doing weekly, that might be helpful.
Amazing. I do see that Seth has one more question. So
yes, please.
We have a couple more minutes, might as well. And I will answer Ellen's question. Will the Spotify playlist be shared in the email recap? I believe that there's a way for me to include it once it's in the on-demand education section. So I will take a peek. If it's not, for anyone that's listening to the recording, if you go inside of the Dreamers and Doers community and you search Spotify podcast hosts, you will be able to very easily find it inside of the Circle community that way. There's a post from me talking about it. Okay, Sada, back to you.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question as you were talking about the framework and sort of how you talk to guests. And because your podcast was based on sort of these themes of your book, it sounds like, tell me if I'm wrong, that you were really aligning your guests with those themes and looking for the stories that would kind of amplify the themes you're trying to share. So I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit more about, like, as a podcast host, one of the things I've talked to a couple friends about is this dynamic of, like, you sort of platform other people's thought leadership. And it can be tricky that some of my friends who've done podcasts were like, oh, well, I kind of undermined my own, like, I didn't end up being my own thought leader in that. And that's a pitfall people have said to me. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that, how you approach that. Or if that's even something that's come up for you.
No, that's important. I think that's where the V2 mom comes in, though, right? Where you're outlining everything that you're trying to accomplish, what your vision is, and then how it's connected to what you're trying to produce, right? And I think for you, it sounds like, I don't want to offend you, but were you saying you were trying to get hired? Is that right? You were looking to...
Yeah, looking to, like, build out my client base and who I'm consulting with, because I want to consult and support trailblazing leaders. And I think one of the best third-party validators of that is to be in conversation with all these amazing leaders I know.
Exactly. So there's something that you can do in that conversation that proves your value as a consultant, as a thought leader, right?
Right.
Because when you're a consultant, you're trying to get to the top line business issue and identify, some of the pitfalls and talk about that in an educated way, right? I would just at a high level, you can do that as the host. And once you start doing that, then you can do takeaways on it, and then you can produce this thought leadership. You're going to have the video snippets. You can start posting that on social, on LinkedIn. So you take that conversation and show your own value as how you funnel it to others, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
And do
Thanks.
that V2 mom for yourself, because that's going to work. It's going to help give you focus.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Amazing. I am going, before we drop off, I'm going to share one quick tip for all the hosts in the room and soon to be hosts. Ellen reminded me of it as she was sharing in the chat that she's gotten so many great guests from the community. So if
Yes.
you are looking for podcast guests, a great way to share that is by adding it into the offer section of the Dreamers and Doers community. So you can find that here on the left side. And then every quarter, we update the evergreen offers. So you can actually browse in podcasts here some of the different current opportunities for getting featured on folks' podcasts in the community. So if you also, like I said in the chat, if you are looking to be a guest yourself and just kind of learn from what it's like to be on the guest side and be like, ooh, I liked how someone did this, but not so much this, it can also help you become a better host. So that's one opportunity here. And if you click on any of these, like I'll click on Chedva just to show you, you can see examples of how she mentioned what her podcast is all about and the guests that she's looking for, which again is just another great way to let other members know whether they're going to be your guest or not, what you're building, what you're an expert at, what conversations you love having. You never know what cool magical connection can come from you sharing it widely in the community.
100%. And you're going to get, once your podcast becomes big, you're going to get a lot of invites or people who want you to invite them on the show. What I will say is, the world is small. Acknowledge those people, even if you don't want them to be on your show, because a lot of people will, at least for me, they come to me with like really long mom stories. And I'm like, okay, it's not going to happen. But at least acknowledge them, because it is a small world and they really, they're putting themselves out there and they want to add value to your thing and, into your podcast. So do just acknowledge them along the way too. Just like a little nitpicky thing for me, because I try to, especially with the way that people share their narratives with me.
That is such a good tip. All right, well, that feels like the perfect note to
I
end
hope
on.
that was
Thank
helpful, you
all.
all. Yeah.
That's so
Okay.
helpful. That
Okay,
was
good.
awesome.
Go do
Such
your
a great
V2
session.
mom, have a plan, and send me your podcast. Okay. All right.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer.
All right,
I'm
thanks
going to
all.
go ahead and close out the recording here, but thank you everyone for being here. Have a fabulous rest of your week and happy September. Hope to see you again soon. Bye,
Likewise.
crew.
Bye.